So let me come then to engaging. So once you've made your contact, you've reached out, you've connected with people. Now you want to make sure that relationship grows well, that they can engage with you, you can build up a relationship, build up some trust. The first point about this, as I mentioned earlier, is that people, they really want to be seen as partners and as equals. That means they want you to know what they've been through. They want you to know something of what is demanded of them, and that they are not just people who have come here to get a job or something like that, and an appreciation of what people's experiences have meant to them and what they've gone through to get here. There's a big question about expectations. A lot of people and organizations saying their Hong Kong arrivals assume a lot about how much the government will do for them. They'll assume that the government will make arrangements or will give advice or will provide them with support, which is a model of government that actually in the UK, the government doesn't do quite so much, and the local authorities don't do as many of the things as a lot of Hong Kong arrivals expect. And also expectations of the voluntary sector. There's a sort of an assumption that the voluntary sector is very well connected, it's very consensual, that everyone in the voluntary sector knows which other organisations are there and what they're doing. And in fact, if you work in the voluntary sector as I do, you know that it's not like that at all. It's actually highly fragmented and very great turnover of staff, and organisations often don't know very much about what other organisations are doing. So there are expectations there that when people first come in touch with you and they ask you to do something and you say you can't do it, they may be very surprised because they assumed you could, or they might even feel that this is frustrating, that you should be able to do to help them, give them this advice, give them this information. So there is a question there about people's expectations of what the voluntary sector is like and what the government can and will do for them as well. In terms of engaging, linked to that view of the voluntary sector, many of the Hong Kong people and organisations are looking for wider connections, and where the Hong Kong organisations themselves are still new and are still building up their own connections, they're very much looking to the voluntary sector and local organisations and local services in London to provide them with those wider connections. So if they form a good trusting relationship with you, if you can then introduce them to other organisations, but people aren't looking for general introductions, they're looking for you to be able to offer them the connections to solve a particular problem they have at the moment. Once people have been here for a year, 2 years or so, it may be more about building up general connections, but at the moment people have immediate needs and they need those, and they want to get on with, they want the voluntary sector to help them meet those needs. Language and interpreting, number 4, in order to have that good relationship, that trust, that good communication going, language of course is always an issue, and we've covered it to some extent already, but interpreting is a question too. Now this is one of the areas that I think the situation with Hong Kong people is probably different to what it would be with interpreting for other languages, because except possibly Iranians and Iraqis perhaps, because the majority of interpreters in the UK who speak Cantonese may very well be mainland Chinese, or they may, there's no guarantee for the Hong Kong person arriving now that that person is going to be supportive and not be feeding back on what they learned from them to the Chinese government. And so this is apparently causing a great deal of difficulty with providing interpreting services, because simply Hong Kong people are very nervous about that surveillance issue, and they don't, unless they know the interpreter, they don't trust the interpreter. So there may be some ways around this. Normally, the best practice would always be to have only qualified interpreters who are level 3 qualified, registered with an agency where they're DBS checked and everything like that. If we're going to have to start drawing on new Hong Kong arrivals to interpret for other newer arrivals, we may have to start looking at working with people who are not qualified interpreters, which goes against best practice, but it may just be necessary, and also working with people who are not DBS checked for the reasons explained already. And unusually, it might be that what we need to do as a sector is ask people to bring somebody with them who can interpret for them. Now, generally, that would be extremely bad practice. And the NHS, for example, where they have done this sometimes, there's always been a pushback. You should never ask people to bring people with you. But it might be that given the sensitivities and the need for relationships and trust, that is the only way around this at present, until more of the newer arriving Hong Kong people get their qualifications and get up to speed as interpreters. And there are opportunities for doing that. That's something that my organisation is involved in. If you want to get in touch, I can tell you about that outside this session. The only thing to draw the line at is you should never use school-aged children as interpreters. That's a simple no. That's not acceptable. Okay. So public funds we've mentioned. Engaging, this is important because I've been told of cases where where people went to an organisation and said, is this public funds you're using for this project? And the organisation has said, oh, I don't know, or yes, I think it is. And because people are so nervous of breaking the terms and the restrictions on their visa, if you as an organisation don't know what public funds are, they will perhaps feel less able to trust you. And because they don't want to take a risk, they won't take up your services. So that is something that is actually, as a minor point, but can be quite significant. Public funds are benefits, but they're not things like library resources or big lottery funded projects or things like that. Diversity, I've commented on already. Always be ready for the fact the person in front of you might not be living the life you think they're living. Older people, younger people, the full diversity of disability and sexuality that goes with any population of people as well. And finally, the need to be aware of the impact of trauma on people's ability to engage with you. And that is what the training that Thrive is going to be putting on in August by Polly from the Nelson Trust is going to be all about.